This is the case that shook an entire nation. In a quiet Canadian town, a young schoolteacher named Claire Harlow vanished without a trace, leaving behind an abandoned car, a single shoe, and a community drowning in fear. At first, suspicion fell on her ex-boyfriend Daniel Price. Then, shockingly, the evidence pointed toward a trusted police officer, Constable Mark Rivers. But nothing could prepare Canada for the final twist, one that no one saw coming. If you enjoy gripping true crime stories like this and want to stay updated with every unexpected turn, make sure you support this channel by subscribing and staying active. Your support helps bring forgotten cases and shocking stories back to light. Maple Hollow in the late 1970s was the kind of place that almost felt untouched by time. The streets were lined with tidy homes. The local diner was always full of familiar faces, and the sound of children playing echoed in every corner. Neighbors knew each other by name. Birthdays were remembered, and community events filled the calendar. It was a place where people trusted that tomorrow would look much like today. Crime was something residents only read about in the papers from larger cities, never something they imagined would land on their doorstep. That all changed on a cold November morning when the first signs of something terribly wrong appeared. A farmer driving his tractor at dawn noticed a car parked oddly at the edge of his field. At first, he assumed it had simply broken down, but as he got closer, the details unsettled him. The car door was left wide open, the keys dangled in the ignition, and a single shoe lay half buried in the mud nearby. There was no sign of the driver. The farmer alerted the authorities, and soon police swarmed the scene, combing the area for any clue that might explain the abandoned vehicle. For Maple Hollow, this discovery was like a crack in a flawless mirror. People who had never locked their doors suddenly began checking windows at night. Conversations in the grocery store turned into hushed speculations. A single shoe in the mud was enough to disturb the quiet rhythm of the entire town. No one knew yet whose car it was or what had happened, but the unease spread faster than wildfire. What began as an ordinary morning quickly shifted into the beginning of one of the darkest chapters the town would ever face. The abandoned car was quickly traced back to Claire Harlow, a 26-year-old schoolteacher who lived only a few blocks from the elementary school where she worked. Claire was the kind of person who seemed to embody the heart of Maple Hollow. She volunteered at community events, ran after-school programs for struggling students, and even organized weekend literacy classes at the community center. She was dependable, warm, and trusted. When news spread that she was the one connected to the strange discovery, disbelief gripped the town. People could not understand how someone like Claire could simply vanish without a trace. The timeline pieced together by investigators was painfully brief. Claire had left the community center around 9 p.m. after finishing her volunteer work. Witnesses remembered her smiling and chatting as she packed her car. She was supposed to head straight home, but she never arrived. The car, found abandoned miles away, was the only tangible clue. Police searched the surrounding fields, ditches, and wooded areas with dogs and volunteers, but no clear trail was discovered. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. For Claire's family, the nightmare set in quickly. They were used to hearing her footsteps late at night when she returned home, but that evening the house stayed silent. Her mother reported her missing within hours, which was unusual in an era when adults often had the freedom to come and go without alarm. The speed of the report spoke volumes about Claire's character. She was not someone who vanished without letting anyone know. As days turned into weeks, Maple Hollow's sense of comfort dissolved. Every poster with Claire's photograph reminded residents that their safe, quiet town was no longer untouched. A mystery had opened, and no one felt truly safe anymore. As the investigation pressed forward, the focus turned toward the people closest to Claire, and one name quickly rose to the surface: Daniel Price. Daniel was a local mechanic in his late 20s who had dated Claire for nearly 2 years before their relationship ended earlier that fall. To outsiders, their breakup seemed amicable, but whispers in the community suggested otherwise. Neighbors recalled seeing tense arguments outside Claire's home, and a few even reported hearing raised voices late at night. It didn't take long for suspicion to fall on him once her car was discovered abandoned. In small towns, where everyone knows each other, gossip spreads faster than evidence. and Daniel became the easy target. When questioned by police, Daniel admitted to seeing Claire occasionally since the breakup, but insisted their relationship was over. Investigators pressed him for details about where he was on the night she vanished, and his account was less than convincing. He claimed he had been home working late in his garage, but no one could verify his story. The uncertainty of his alibi gave investigators reason to keep circling back to him, and soon his name was circulating on every street corner. Reporters framed him as the likely suspect, and his nervous demeanor during press coverage only fueled that perception. Despite the pressure, the case against Daniel remained circumstantial. No physical evidence tied him to the abandoned car or to Claire's disappearance. Still, in the minds of many Maple Hollow residents, the lack of proof didn't matter. Fear and grief needed an outlet, and Daniel became the face of their suspicions. For weeks, he lived under a cloud of scrutiny, watched closely by neighbors who once trusted him. What the town didn't realize was that focusing too narrowly on Daniel might blind them to the darker truth waiting to be uncovered. 2 weeks after Claire's disappearance, the search took a grim and unsettling turn. On a cold morning, a fisherman casting his line along the Coldwater River noticed something unusual snagged in the roots of a half-submerged tree. When he pulled it free, he realized he was holding a torn, blood-stained jacket. Authorities were called immediately, and within hours the area was crawling with investigators. The jacket was identified as Claire's, one she had been seen wearing on the night she left the community center. Its discovery transformed the investigation from a missing persons case into something far more ominous. The details were troubling. The sleeve was ripped, as if it had been yanked or pulled during a struggle, and the bloodstains were undeniable. Forensic tests confirmed that the blood matched Claire's type, deepening fears that she had been violently attacked. The location of the jacket also raised disturbing questions. The Coldwater River was only 3 miles from where her car had been abandoned, suggesting that whoever was involved had moved her, or at least her belongings, from one place to another. Search teams scoured the riverbanks, bringing in dogs, and even dragging the water in hopes of finding more evidence. Yet, despite days of exhaustive work, no body and no additional personal items were found. The discovery spread panic throughout Maple Hollow. People who had been clinging to the hope that Claire might have run away or left voluntarily now faced the grim reality that something terrible had happened. For her family, the sight of her bloody jacket was almost unbearable, a piece of evidence too cruel to ignore. For the investigators, it was a clue that brought them closer to the truth, but it also introduced new complications. Without a body, the case remained painfully unresolved, teetering between tragedy and mystery. By December, Maple Hollow had changed in ways that no one could have imagined just a month earlier. The once cheerful streets were now quiet and uneasy, as if the entire town held its breath waiting for answers. Families who had long prided themselves on their sense of trust began double-checking locks at night and keeping a closer eye on their children. The local diner, normally filled with laughter and the sound of clinking coffee cups, grew quieter, with conversations hushed and centered only on one subject: Claire. Every new rumor, every whispered theory, spread quickly, feeding the town's growing anxiety. The constant media attention only added to the pressure. Reporters from across Canada filled the streets, turning Maple Hollow into a place that felt more like a stage than a community. Cameras followed residents, snapping photos of grieving family members and cornering townsfolk for comments. The attention, instead of bringing comfort, heightened the sense of fear. The town that had once been proud of its small-town warmth was now being painted across headlines as a place haunted by shadows. The police, too, felt the weight of expectation. Every tip, no matter how small, was chased down. Volunteers searched the woods, ditches, and riverbanks again and again, hoping something had been overlooked. Still, no new evidence appeared. Days turned into weeks, and frustration boiled beneath the surface. People began questioning whether the authorities were doing enough, while others worried that the truth might never be uncovered. For Claire's family, the silence was the hardest part. The empty chair at the dinner table during the holidays was a painful reminder that she was gone, with no answers in sight. Maple Hollow was caught between grief and suspicion, its sense of safety slipping further away each day. In January, when the bitter cold had settled over Maple Hollow and hope was beginning to fade, the case took an unexpected turn. A hunter walking deep into the forest stumbled upon something buried shallowly beneath the frozen earth. At first, he thought it was just a discarded bag, but when authorities arrived and carefully unearthed it, they found a small, weathered suitcase. Inside were belongings that left no doubt it was connected to Claire. Her diary, filled with neat handwriting, lay alongside a silver locket her mother had given her as a teenager. Her driver's license and other personal papers were also inside. The discovery instantly reignited the investigation and caught national attention. The suitcase raised unsettling questions. If Claire had vanished suddenly, how had her most personal items ended up buried miles away from her car? It suggested someone had taken deliberate steps to hide them, someone who wanted to redirect the investigation or erase traces of her life. But what truly shocked investigators was what the forensic team uncovered next. Among the items inside, fingerprints were lifted, and they didn't just belong to Claire. A second set was matched against police records, and the results stunned everyone. They belonged to a serving officer from Maple Hollow's own police department. The revelation was explosive. Until that moment, suspicion had always focused outward, on boyfriends, strangers, or nameless predators. Now the investigation pointed inward, at one of the very people sworn to protect the town. The news rattled the entire country, dominating headlines and sparking outrage. How could a trusted officer be linked so directly to the evidence? For Maple Hollow, the discovery was more than a clue. It was a betrayal that cut to the core of their trust in authority, and it reshaped the entire direction of the case. The fingerprints from the suitcase were traced back to Constable Mark Rivers, a respected officer who had been with the Maple Hollow police force for nearly a decade. He was well known in the community, often seen chatting with shopkeepers or lending a hand at town events. Many residents remembered him as one of the first officers to respond when Claire was reported missing, a steady presence who reassured the family and organized search parties. To learn that his prints were found on her belongings was unthinkable, and the news spread through the town like a shockwave. Investigators immediately turned their focus toward him, combing through his patrol records and duty logs. What they found only deepened suspicion. On the night of Claire's disappearance, his official paperwork claimed he was patrolling in a completely different area, yet witnesses recalled seeing his cruiser parked near the stretch of road where Claire's car was later discovered. Further examination revealed tire tracks near the abandoned vehicle that matched the model of his police cruiser. Each new detail chipped away at the trust people had placed in him, and the community's disbelief gave way to anger and betrayal. The national media seized on the story, portraying it as a shocking scandal. A man who wore the uniform of protection now cast as the prime suspect in a beloved teacher's disappearance. For residents, it felt like the ground had shifted beneath their feet. If someone like Mark Rivers could be capable of involvement, then who could they trust? The police department scrambled to maintain credibility while quietly preparing for what seemed inevitable, a public arrest. The idea that the case's darkest turn might involve one of their own pushed Maple Hollow further into fear and uncertainty, setting the stage for an even greater revelation to come. Before Constable Mark Rivers could face trial, the case delivered a twist that no one could have predicted. Forensic scientists reviewing the blood on Claire's torn jacket discovered something unsettling. It did not belong to her at all. Initial assumptions had been wrong. Advanced DNA testing, which was becoming more reliable in the early 1980s, revealed the blood came from a relative of Rivers. The implication was that the evidence had been staged, deliberately planted to point suspicion toward him. Suddenly, the seemingly airtight case against the officer began to unravel. As investigators retraced every step, inconsistencies piled up. The suitcase, once thought to be hidden by Rivers, was buried in a shallow grave so carelessly it almost appeared designed to be found. The fingerprints inside were indeed his, but given his role in handling Claire's belongings during earlier searches, the prints could have been transferred without malicious intent. Just as the town prepared itself for the disgrace of one of their officers, the narrative began to collapse. Then came the most shocking revelation of all. In March, police in Montreal responding to a routine report of a suspicious tenant uncovered the truth. Claire Harlow was alive. She had been living under a false identity in a modest apartment, her hair dyed, her name changed, and her past carefully concealed. When confronted, Claire admitted she had staged her disappearance to escape mounting debts and personal struggles she felt she could no longer bear. The abandoned car, the planted jacket, even the scattered belongings were part of a carefully constructed plan. For Maple Hollow, and for Canada, the case was unlike anything seen before. What had begun as a presumed murder investigation ended as a tale of betrayal, manipulation, and broken trust. The unexpected turn stunned the nation, leaving behind not closure, but disbelief.